Hello and welcome to another edition of Radio YesCymru with me, Sean Jobbins. Yes, Radio YesCymru on your favourite podcast apps and also on the YesCymru YouTube channel, and follow us on social media as well and spread the love. So news and views about independence and YesCymru in general. I'm really excited for the discussion this evening. Is about the economy, the situation Wales is in now, what we could be with a pro-independence Plaid-led government after 2026, and then maybe the viability or the issues in terms of what we can do within independence Wales in terms of economy. So my guest speakers today are Luke Fletcher, who's a Plaid Cymru member for South Wales West.
Yep.
I got that wrong, right? No, so that's
No, you got it right.
And is good, and it's also Plaid's economic and energy spokesman. And then Jonathan Evershed, who's a special advisor on policy and research for Plaid in the Senate as well. I'm really we discussed this before Christmas, boys. So I'm really glad to have you and try and get the time in your busy schedule to speak to Radio YesCymru. So we'll kick off maybe, Luke, with this stuff, because I know you've been doing a lot with the absolute tragic news with Margam. I mean, my father's family basically moved from Brecon to Llansamlet to work in Margam. That's why my grandfather worked on railways around there. I had uncles working there. Absolutely catastrophic, I think. So can you maybe just give us a broad view, Luke, of where the Welsh economy is now and what the challenge is now when, when we work later and work from that, maybe both of you, what Wales could be doing, say, post 2026 with the powers we have. But start now with where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to be here this evening. I mean, this is my first time on the podcast, so
Yep.
and like you said, we've been trying to get this sorted for a while. So great to finally now get the ticket off the bucket list, as it were. Like I mean, I think a lot of people who are going to be listening tonight know exactly where the Welsh economy is at the moment. It's struggling. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's not really working. I think what's really important for us to first establish is when we say it's not working, well, what do we actually mean by that? Because it's working for some people. There's no doubt about that. It's not working for our communities. It's not working for people. It's not working for you and me. It's not working for our neighbours. So I think the thing that we have to focus on now, if we're lucky enough to see a Plaid Cymru government get elected, is actually how do we make an economy that works for people? How do we make sure that we have an economy that provides everything that people need, right? A warm home, food on a table, enough disposable income to go out on the weekend if they want to with their friends, or to take their family away on a holiday once a year, right? I think actually what we saw in Tata Steel in Talbot crystallizes one of the primary issues within the Welsh economy. You alluded to it earlier. I mean, I was on the picket line with steel workers whenever there was a picket line. Spoke about it several times in the Senate chamber, and I genuinely, I think it for me was one of the more difficult periods of my time as an elected member of the Senate, in just seeing the situation unfold and just looking at what the government was doing around it and just thinking, what the hell is going on?
Well, I mean, and this is a thing, Luke. I mean,
Yeah.
the argument we've had as supporters of independence or whatever for decades is, that being part of the UK gives us the broad shoulders, isn't it? To make sure then when things are tough, the UK is big enough to sort us out. And there's an argument for it. I don't believe it. I've seen other countries smaller than Wales do well without the broad shoulders of a neighbouring benevolent friend. But there's an argument that can be made for that. But it hasn't happened, has it? I mean,
but Talbot is the proof.
Yes, exactly.
Right? We had a situation, right, where you had a sovereign national resource important to national security, important to infrastructure, important to our ambitions around net zero. And what we saw essentially was a government that washed its hands of the situation and said, oh, sorry, guys, it's a private company, we can't do anything. Now, if that is the attitude, not just of Welsh government, but UK government, then my question, and the point I made consistently, is what is the point of you? What is the point of you if you're not going to step in and protect an asset like Tata Steel and the blast furnaces, so the steel production element of it, but also protect the workers there who lost their jobs? Because we're not just talking about 2,500 or 2,800 people directly employed in Tata who lost their jobs. We're talking about closer probably to 10,000 when you consider the supply chain and the economic impact, not just in Talbot, but across South Wales, across that M4 corridor, all
yeah,
the way up to Ebble Vale, because a lot of the
yeah,
people who worked in the Ebble Vale steel mill ended up coming down to Talbot. But it crystallises a real issue for me with the Welsh economy, right? And that is the question of ownership, right? And I'm not just talking about ownership in terms of ownership of your natural resources. I mean, if we look, for example, at water, I mean,
yeah,
the reality that we face at the moment where water companies right now are turning around and saying they've got to bow bills because they can't afford to invest in the infrastructure
yeah,
the cheek of it is it's an absolute disgrace, right? When we've seen those same water companies,
yeah,
the water company is not innocent in all this, by the way,
yeah,
giving all their profits over to shareholders rather than investing in the
yeah,
infrastructure to make
yeah,
that cheaper. So firstly, we're not just talking about ownership of natural resources. We should see the water and water company put into public hands. We should see energy companies in public hands.
yeah,
But we're also as well talking about actually the ownership of private enterprises in Wales as well. So we've seen in Port Talbot what happens when we have no control over a big industry. We see now in Bridgend, and we've seen it over the years, what happens when you have businesses that are, yes, set up in the area, but aren't rooted in the area. We see what happens when they decide, okay, off we go. Ford was one of
yeah,
them, close to
yeah,
2,000 people losing their job. Biomet, the more recent one now. Friends of mine working in both of those factories now find themselves struggling to find work of equal pay to what
yes,
they were there. So
yeah,
ownership
and the
is a
skills
key
as well.
question, yeah, and the skills as well.
Yeah,
So we really need to, I think, focus when we get into government on that question of ownership, building up
yeah,
Welsh businesses, expanding Welsh businesses, talking about all sorts of models of owning businesses as well.
yeah.
Cooperatives, for example. But
Well,
I'm starting to get ahead of myself now.
yeah, let's go into
People
that in a
talk about
minute. So, I
it.
mean, so basically, if the Westminster isn't ready to stand up and save something like Margam and Talbot,
Yeah,
then what is the point of being part of the UK
yeah,
or being ruled by Westminster? And if the government in Cardiff won't do it because they're too weak, too unambitious, then what is the point of them being in government? Jonathan, I know you're biting the bit to get in here.
you got me
I mean,
going on
and I think
Talbot.
there's so much to discuss about ownership, and I think this is quite interesting because I mean, and it's my experience with YesCymru as well. For most of decades, although they're great papers written by people like DJ Davis and old French Davis back in 1930s and 40s about the Welsh economy, which people should really just find those pamphlets. The national movement has also been around the language and culture, which is fine because that's the nation is made of that. But I think that was interesting. I think the last couple of years, the national movement, YesCymru Plaid, are talking about economy, and I think maybe to surprise of someone older my generation is that this is actually the strongest hand we have. You know that the absolute catastrophic governance of Wales through Westminster. We just need to look at Ireland and see. You can discuss with the ins and outs of Ireland, but how an independent country can sustain itself and see the before and after. And you only need to look at Northern Ireland Republic to see how that. So, Jonathan, I mean, Lucas touched on some of the problems. How do you see generally how we get out of this hold? And then we maybe go into details, maybe policies into post 2026.
I think looking back again at what happened with Tata, and worth bearing in mind that the crisis, and that's what it was and remains really for the Welsh economy, and more particularly for the people that have or will lose their jobs as a consequence. That crisis began under a Tory government, and we then had a Labour government, well, then Labour opposition, telling us that they had a £3 billion plan for British or UK steel.
Yeah,
We consistently, or Luke, I should say, consistently asked for the detail of that. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like in terms of what Labour's plan is um, for Tata? And that never materialized. And I think in our heart of hearts, we feared that it wouldn't. Meanwhile, you had Labour members of the Senedd doing, what I really, you know, I don't make apologies really for the strength of my language. I can't stand, which is this sort of oh dearism, which is commentating on politics
yeah,
rather than acknowledging that it is them who are in a position to actually do something about it. And this, it's a shame what's happening in Port Talbot, Labour politicians, Labour MSs standing on the picket line,
Okay.
promising that there was a plan to
The utter uselessness, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
you're in government.
But-
what is the point of being in government if you won't do something? For
And
heaven's sake.
Yeah, this then brings me back to the question that you asked, which is, well, what can we do that's better? Or what should we be doing? And the point is we can do things in Wales that Welsh government hasn't done. So over the course of our, the work on the economy plan that we have been developing, it doesn't have a formal title yet, so we'll call it, Plaid's new plan for the Welsh economy. I think it needs something pithier, but
New deal.
If you can think of one, Sean.
Yeah, maybe if listeners can think of
viewers
one,
can type into the YouTube channel and
exactly.
and tell us what's happened. What do you think?
But what we've looked, one of the things that we've looked at, and we've been working with, with economics, lecturers and academics at Bangor University to do this, is looking at Welsh Labour or Labour in Wales's economic thinking over the course of devolution. What's really noticeable is that there's this paradox, which is the more powers we've had devolved to Wales to meaningfully influence the course of economic development in Wales, the less Labour governments have tangibly done to deliver economic development. We look at that we have a range of powers available to us on things like skills and training, is one area where actually we've had a range of powers since the beginning of devolution, where full range of those powers has never been, Labour governments have never made full range of that use of powers. And the more powers that have been devolved, the less clear Welsh governments have become about what they want to use those powers to do. We don't have any, or no Labour economic strategy has had clear targets which reflect their thinking about economic strategy for the majority of the history of devolution.
So it's basically dog and mangerism, isn't it? They want the power, but they don't want to do anything. And I think this is one of the reasons why I support independence, because it also does bring in independence of mind. So almost any government in an independent Wales would, by definition, be better, because they would have to just actually make sure that the economy works to pay the taxes. So I mean, I think Labour and devolution point of view is, we don't have to worry too much because we're bailed out, and this is the way they think we'll get done. They say the budget passed this week. We're getting more money from Westminster, is thinking about the money we can be producing ourselves.
Well, there's two points I want to pick up on. I mean, like, I won't stay on it now, but what happened in Talbot was one of the biggest industrial catastrophes since the closure of the mines. Right, there's no escaping it. And the point Jonathan made around the ODerism of government, I think was why you might have noticed I was starting to get a bit riled up, because we had a situation where, I, as the Plaid Cymru's economy spokesperson, was putting the idea of nationalisation of the site to save the site on the table. Now, whatever anyone thinks of that, you could disagree with it, you could agree with it, but it was an idea that I thought was worthy of being discussed. And all we would have back from government was, oh, well, we can't simply do that. That's the end of the conversation. No sort of desire to really actually work with not just Plaid Cymru, but other parties as well, to work out the solution for the steel industry in Wales. And I think that actually just crystallises the biggest problem. And, the idea then, of course, that Jonathan has put here, that, we have increasingly over the years seen a government is unwilling to actually set targets and goals for their economic policy, is plain and simple for everybody to see. So since being elected in 2021, I think I've sat in that chamber and listened to 3 or 4 different economy strategies being laid out on the floor of the Saesneg. And, if you'd pick any one of them, I can guarantee you almost nothing from those strategies has been achieved, and hasn't actually even been measured to see if it has had any effect. And so for me and Jonathan, as well, as we were working through the economy strategy for Plaid with a number of other people, one of the key things for us was, well, we have to make sure that firstly we're setting clearly what the course is here for these policies, but also as well, and the key thing above all else is that they are actually delivered. Because I think the reason why people outside of politics, outside of that political bubble, completely disengaged and completely apathetic towards politicians and politics is because we haven't seen delivery at the scale that we should have for the last couple of years. People are still struggling to put food on the table, are still struggling to heat their homes, and you're talking about people here who aren't out of work. They're in work. They work in 2 jobs, 3 jobs. I mean, in the area that I represent, Kyra consistently at the top of the UK index of multiple deprivation. A couple of months ago, on one of my street surgeries, met a single mother working 3 jobs, and she still only had £1.24 left in her account at the end of the week. Now that's just simply,
well, the system stacked against it, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
it's really not working.
No, exactly, and I think, and there's no wonder then people are angry. Just to sort of finish on this, I don't want to go too much on the Margam and the Talbot. We've heard all this business as net zero is closing down Tata. I mean, what is, just so we can clear the air on this, is that anything to do with it, or is it just a total nonsense?
Oh, it's a load of rubbish.
That's
Right.
it. Yeah.
It's a load of rubbish. I mean, of course, what we're seeing being put in place of the blast furnaces is an electric arc furnace. Yes, it's greener. Yes, it reduces our carbon output. But the whole idea that Tata are doing this because of net zero is a complete fallacy, because you only have to look at what they're doing globally.
Yeah,
and
well, they're building a
they're
place in
making
Belgium,
globally.
if I'm correct.
Well, there's a place in the Netherlands.
Netherlands.
They're opening new blast furnaces in India as well. So what we found ourselves in a situation now where we're going to be importing steel that is dirtier, so from a blast furnace that is dirtier, and from a country as well, if we're going to be honest here.
Yeah.
These environmental regulations aren't where they need to be, nor their workers' rights either. So actually, if we're saying the net zero is the reason why this has happened, you can see that it's not the reason, because we're actually in a worse position now. We've just exported our carbon output to another country.
Okay, so things are looking pretty bad in one respect. So 2026, the Senate elections in May. Obviously, Luke, you're a Plaid candidate, or you're a Plaid member. You're working on the economic policy for that. So what kind of things would Plaid be looking to, with the powers we have now, which would actually make a difference to people, and and tangible stuff as well, which people actually within about 12 months, 18 months, and I understand some things will take longer, will actually see the difference. I mean, start with you, Luke, and then maybe go to Jonathan.
Yeah, because just for clarity as well, I'm not yet a Plaid Cymru candidate. I intend to be a Plaid Cymru candidate.
Okay, you're a Plaid Cymru
but,
member at the moment, so
yeah. So hopefully I'll be in a position to be able to be able to be a Plaid Cymru candidate for the election. But look, going into the election immediately after then the election, where hopefully we'll see Plaid Cymru in government, I think there's a number of things we can do right off the bat. So for a long time we've talked about the need for a development agency, a WDA 2.0. Stay with me, right? Because we're not just talking about the WDA as it was, because there were a lot of problems there.
Yeah.
Now, towards the end of the WDA's life, it actually started to make some of those investments within Wales. So investing in Welsh businesses and trying to grow Welsh businesses. That's what I think we actually need a new development agency to focus on. So to look at how do we provide enough support for those Welsh businesses that are in place already to be able to expand. Because if you look at the current business support landscape at the moment, you can find loads of different funding if you want to set up a business, if you want to develop that business. And I hear this consistently when I speak to businesses, not just in my area, but beyond as well. If you want to expand your business, then there's barely anything, if anything at all, to help with that. And that includes training and advice on how to navigate certain elements of, say, the planning system or what have you, right? So we need that development agency to focus on growing Welsh businesses. We also need it as well then to look at legacy planning. So there are plenty of examples out there at the moment in Wales, historical examples where mum and dad have built this business up. The kids don't want to take it on, so naturally the parents then want to sell that business. Now, Jonathan's going to roll his eyes because I always use this example, but Rachel's Dairy was a Welsh business, very successful Welsh business that was ultimately bought by an entity outside of Wales and ultimately shut down. And all the economic wealth that generated for that local area disappeared with it. So we have to have a development agency that actually is actively looking at how do we ensure that when we're in situations like that, because there will be more of them, because the reality is that the Welsh economy, in terms of business activity, is made up of 96% of small businesses or small, medium-sized enterprises. So there will be more situations like that. So we need a development agency to look at it and say, right, okay, how do we keep some of that wealth in our communities? Now, there's multiple ways of doing that. One way we've talked about doing it is actually looking at workers' cooperatives, workers' buyouts as an option to keep those businesses within the community that actually is ultimately, producing the profit and working within those businesses. And let's not forget, I mean, Wales is the home of the idea of cooperativism. Robert Owen back in the day, and we look at the global landscape when it comes to cooperatives. We are miles behind where we should be. Look at the Basque Country, look at the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, some of the largest industrial exporters in the world. So we really need to be ambitious in this sector. We can't limit ourselves here. And some good practices across Wales at the moment. But what's the saying? The worst thing to spread, or the good ideas don't travel far. We need to find a way actually to ensure that that good practice is spread out and is easily accessible to people, and people understand it as well. Because right now we have a number of cooperatives, and I think a lot of them are quite small scale, and it's great that they're happening. What I'm really interested in actually is how do we scale up cooperatives to a degree that actually they're employing not just 100 or 200, but they're starting to employ 1,000, 2,000 people, and all that economic wealth and all that generated wealth stays within those communities. I think that is really important.
Okay, two things. I mean, some people say, look, what we need from Plaid, and what the good way to keep business going, Luke Fletcher or Jonathan Evershed, is keep the taxes low. So for people paying less in business tax, that's better than having any WGA or any new plan. And that's what Plaid should be pushing, just to keep those lower those taxes. And that would be a headline grab, which people say, okay, Plaid is going to bring down these taxes. That makes sense. Jonathan, I don't know, does Plaid or does the Senate have powers for that? Or, I mean, do you think it's something deeper?
So on business taxes, business rates in particular, Sean, you and I both live in Aberystwyth, and we know how our town centres are suffering. And there's been a reasonable amount of coverage recently of the extent, the scale of business rates in the centre of Aberystwyth as compared to, Cardiff or Swansea or elsewhere in Wales or the UK more widely. At the moment, our business rate regime does not differentiate between those small, locally owned high street businesses that bring us into our town centres, particularly in sector, in the hospitality sector, which is what most of, so much of our shopping is now done online. What we go to our town centres to do is to meet people, either for business or for leisure, cafes, restaurants, pubs, the rest of it. Our business rate regime does not support that as it stands. And also it doesn't differentiate between those locally owned businesses and multinational out of town retailers or big supermarkets.
So is there something Senate can do about that? Is that within the competence, within the powers?
Yes. And we've just, the Welsh government, or recently the local government, or I can't remember the name of the bill, but
local government finance.
Local Government Finance Act gives us the power to, and this gets slightly technical, but effectively to vary the multiplier that is used to determine the scale of business rates. And don't ask me to describe how the multiplier works in detail here now. But basically, what we have the power to do is vary that multiplier so that we can, for example, create additional advantages, if you like, or supports for locally owned businesses on the high streets relative to those out of town retailers. Just for an example, to give one example.
And that's an example of something we can do right now. So I take the point that many people would argue that the best thing you can do for businesses is lower taxes. I think a lot of things have to happen. It can't just be that one thing.
Yeah, no.
The beauty of being able to vary the multiplier, and Jonathan's already said, we've now got that power, or we will have that power come April the 5th. The beauty of it is that when we hear all the time from government that we can't afford to lower business rates for businesses wholesale, fine, okay, let's accept that argument. What you can do though is make sure that you shift the emphasis within the business rate system. So those are out the town shopping centres, those multinationals are paying more than your local business. So for example, in Bridgend, there's a chain coffee shop that ultimately is paying the same rate as a coffee shop that is owned by somebody from Bridgend who is running an independent place. And again, like the beauty of it is that ultimately isn't going to cost the government more money. What we're saying here is actually here's the same income pot. We're just shifting the emphasis about who pays what proportion.
Yeah, because I think this is the big argument, isn't it? The money is there, but it's not in the right place.
No, exactly.
And hasn't been certainly over 30, 40 years since Margaret Thatcher so privatised everything, and things have basically gone out, literally out of the state or out of the UK. And out of communities. Not that things were perfect before then, but at least there's a circular economy, certainly through nationalised industries, that things were going back in. If they were well managed, is a different question. But we've lost certainly 30 years of investment. And there's a clawback to that, and you just only need to go abroad to see the difference. I go to Brittany sometimes, and you see, Basque Country, you see the difference in the quality of the infrastructure there to Wales, and that's what's happened basically. And I remember when I went to Brittany first time in the 1880s. If anything, Wales was richer looking. Their farms certainly were like something from 50s in some places, from my point of view. So, I mean, with the money there, we need to spread the love, if you like, and make sure it stays in people's pockets or is taken out of the pockets of people who can't afford more and hardly notice at all.
It comes back to the question of ownership, doesn't it?
Yes.
That's the key thing here. And that should be, as I said, the key underpinning principle for any economic strategy is how do we actually look at ownership and meaningfully change the ownership structures of private enterprises so that actually more people in Wales own them? How do we make sure that those natural resources are in the hands of the state so the state can reinvest those profits and so on?
I mean, and the more I think about it, and I was talking to some colleagues in YesCymru about this, the old Cymdeithas o'r Iaith, the Welsh Language Society slogan, Nid yw Cymru ar werth, Wales is not for sale. I'm seeing Canadians wearing Canada is not for sale. And I think that's quite a strong message, I think, for Wales in general. We are being asset stripped with things like the Crown Estate and, well, in general. So that's like 700 years of that. And in terms of large things, same with Tata, we've just been bought and sold as a rag doll, And I think maybe Plaid needs to start thinking about, Wales is not for sale kind of strategy. I don't know. I think there's something there which I think the ownership is a thing. And I think there's something quite tangible. People feel they've lost something. They've lost the town centres. They lost the village are literally closing down, and they've got nothing to show. And it's very, very sad, especially the older people who have been voting Labour for literally decades. What have they got to show for it? Literally, what do you have to show for it?
Exactly. I mean, I don't know about you, Jonathan, but it sounds like we might have someone who is particularly happy with what we're saying in the economy strategy.
I think maybe we're going to owe Cymdeithas for the title of our economy strategy in the end.
But I think Wales, we have been asked this street. I always say this. It's quite that Venn diagram of people saying Wales is too poor to independent, and the same people saying Wales shouldn't control its own assets. It's totally overlapping, and isn't that an interesting coincidence? So,
coming back then, sorry, just on that, coming back again then to, what I've called Welsh Labour O'Dearism, that extends there to the Crown Estate as well. We know from FOIs that we've submitted, that Plaid Cymru has submitted, that there have been no, that it's not even that Welsh Labour aren't fighting for, for control over those Welsh assets. They haven't even asked for them.
Yeah, it's just, well, it's total subaltern government, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's,
and this is where
willingness to stand up for
well, it's a total colonial relationship, isn't it? You don't ask too much of the master because you don't want to upset him. So and then he's totally bought into the project. So I mean, I can say that maybe Plaid can't. So okay, looking for 2026 election in May, there's a couple of things. So Plaid will be looking to implement basically around the sub theory of owning the assets or owning ownership of government. So looking to improve things like education apprenticeships. So those are tailored for the Welsh economy and maybe a bigger push for them. Look at the legacy planning, which is so important, stuff with small businesses, farms.
Yeah.
And they say that those are being lost, and as I say, maybe the son or daughter doesn't want to take it over, that's fine, but maybe look into some kind of cooperative setup for that. And I'm very glad to hear you say, I think, Luke, about big cooperatives. I always got this slightly cynical view where if a cooperative is going set up, or if it's it's an element, it's a sign of failure. Is it just me when I see a pub has closed down and the local community want to open a pub and I've chucked in money for this, I'm thinking maybe people just don't want to go to the pub. Maybe the town has gone so poor or so old that it just doesn't have the clientele for that pub or shop. And are we so almost like people want to keep open these old chapels where it's an emotional thing, but really it's a sign. The barometer is basically saying that community is dying. So I'm always a bit suspicious of stuff like that.
I can understand that as well. But ultimately, a lot of these institutions were profitable at one point, and there's no reason why they couldn't be profitable again. And there might be a number of reasons as to why then somebody wants to, why workers have decided to buy out that business. It could be purely because the owner.
Okay, I'm going to chuck this in again.
Yeah.
And this is because I've been hearing people talk about cooperatives in Plaid Cymru since the 1980s, literally, usually in very cold village halls and on very hard seats. And my bum's hurting after about an hour and a half or so and going to the finer details of Gramsci or something. And so I'm very cynical about this. So, I mean, do these cooperatives work? I think people feel that cooperatives are there and they don't actually make money. I think this is conception, I think, certainly in the UK. That's basically a sign of failure. 2, they don't work. 3, you're going to end up with whoever has the loudest voice and is ready to sit through 5 hours of committees wins, and then the thing sort of collapses after about 3 years after the initial excitement. So do they actually work?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's 2 points I would make here. The first one is actually looking, as I said earlier, to the Basque Country and the Emilia-Romagna regions, where cooperatives, so in the Basque Country in particular, Mondragon, one of the biggest industrial exporters in the world, right? When we were talking about Tata Steel, here we are again going back to Tata Steel. It's as if we're obsessed with it. But when we go back to Tata Steel, when we were arguing nationalisation, it was so then that we could begin the process of creating a workers' cooperative out of that steel plant. And that's exactly how they run steel plants in the Basque Country. Cooperative steel is the norm. These things, the reality of the situation actually is that cooperatives have to be profit-making ventures to survive. But we're not talking about here something that is, because one of the other arguments I've heard over the years is that essentially cooperatisation is nationalisation through the back door. I mean, it simply isn't. And they're still private entities. They still have to make a profit. And again, there are multiple examples across Wales itself of really successful cooperatives. This is something we know how to do. So I think, if we are able to upscale that and prove to people that actually here is a really successful business model. Hey, and guess what? If you're working in that business, you're actually benefiting directly from that business as well. Then you start, I think, to break down some of those stigmas. Because it's not the first time I've heard some of those accusations.
Well, and I think this is part of the problem. And I think seeing that there is profit there, I think actually people understand, okay, Plaid or the policy actually is a serious one. I'll go to you in a minute, Jonathan. I was speaking to Ed Jones, who's a lecturer up in Bangor University in economics, And you said, in terms of all the Wales seems to be leading the way in the UK, certainly in terms of cooperative pubs or community-owned pubs, and not one of them has gone bankrupt since COVID, which surprised me. So, Jonathan, so we're going to look at basically keeping money here, ownership, legacy planning, looking at business rates. Anything else you think Plaid should be looking at post 2026 in being in government?
Just to add one final thing on the that you've been hearing people in Plaid talk about cooperatives in Coal Village Hall since the 1980s. We have there's a degree to which this plan that we've been working on, it's either time to put up or shut up on some of this stuff, basically. And we've looked at how do we overcome those final barriers to doing that kind of corporatization at scale. If we're serious about doing it, now is the time,
Right.
And because we've been talking about it since the 1980s in Coal Village Halls, and Luke's already outlined why it makes sense to do that. And we've, external work has been commissioned as part of this process of like, how do we finally overcome those barriers of moving to that for kind of corporatization at scale. It involves things like a dedicated fund through the Development Bank of Wales at a serious enough scale to be able to support employee buyouts, corporatization at scale and things like this. So that's part of the overall package. Another thing that we've looked at is research and development and innovation in Wales. And that includes, for example, looking at how we, and this has been in the news recently, how we do or indeed do not support our universities here in Wales. And we've been
Tell me about it.
Yeah. Well, I thought this would be a popular topic of conversation given the present audience. But the fact that the way that student finance in Wales is currently structured means that 2 in every £5 we spend on student finance in Wales goes to subsidising English universities.
Yeah, absolutely crazy.
And we need ultimately what we've been calling for recently is a full-scale cross-party review of the entire way in which higher education in Wales is funded and structured, and that's a call I would reiterate here. But one aspect of that has to be looking at things like the Seren program, which actively sends students out of Wales. My view is that it's actively detrimental to encouraging students from particular kinds of backgrounds from going to university at all, never mind going to university in Wales. And it also comes with a financial price tag that could be better deployed supporting Welsh universities. But we need to look at the structure of student financing as part of a wider package of reforms around how we fund innovation in Wales and how we fund universities in particular, because these are cliches at this point, aren't they? But things like the ongoing revolution in AI and technological developments, these are all things that are coming down the track and we don't have the kind of research wherewithal in Wales at the moment to keep on top of these things. And that's because of the sort of parlous state of our higher education sector. So we've got.
I mean, these are all sounding very important and structural things which Wales needs to sort out. And what is the point of devolution if you're not going to do it? I think Luke, you referred to maybe nationalisation or nationalising industries as well, or assets. I don't know if that's possible, but I mean, I think to some extent, I think that would go down quite well in many parts of Wales. What I'm guessing, just again to be devil's advocate, I can imagine someone like the Tories would say, look, what we need is this, something like lower taxes, which I think you've covered there in a way which actually within the competence of the Senedd. Secondly, they'd say, we're going to open up the M4, the bypass to Newport, and that'll answer all questions as if there aren't any other traffic congestion's come down the A470 every year down to every day from Cardiff, and that seems to be not a problem at all. So they're going to go for some very, very simple things. And my concern then is, and this is why we don't get structural change, is because people are going for something, which isn't irrelevant, but it's not ever getting to the root of the problem. So I mean, I think Plaid needs to be aware of what actually sells on doorstep and what people understand. It's not just as you know, the policies. I mean, if you're going on the doorstep now and trying to get that basic economic argument, for Plaid, but also to an extent a vote to confidence in Wales and the Senedd, what would those be?
Well, I think it's about firstly looking at or asking people a question, which is, how do you feel about your life right now? Do you feel like things are getting better? Do you feel like things are getting worse? And if they're getting worse, then we have to firstly, yes, address some of these structural issues. Yes,
Yeah.
and okay, accept that that's not necessarily appealing. But we also, as well, then have to be able to say, well, look, in somewhere like Bridgend, right? You've seen a number of large businesses leave over the last couple of years. Ford, as I mentioned earlier, Ford, Biomet. We want to reverse that. We'll do that by helping those Welsh businesses expand and grow, creating more jobs and good paying jobs as well. Jobs that are fulfilling. But we'll also as well look at things that are important to everyday life. We've talked about the high street right here and high street regeneration. There are so many different policies that we can pull out there right now that actually address a lot of different issues within Welsh society. So, we talked about business rates. I'd also say, well, there's an opportunity for us in our town centres to address issues such as the housing crisis. Now, my office in Bridgend, there are 3 or 4 floors above my office that are completely empty. They could be converted into 1-bed, 2-bed flats. We could bring people into town centres again.
Yeah.
That in itself will have a cascading effect. Then more shops open up, you got that inbuilt footfall. I always use this example, and I'll admit, I stole it from Urban Foundry in Swansea, founder Ben. I've had a number of conversations with him about this. But what you think of the sitcom Friends, right? They all meet in the coffee shop because they all live above the coffee shop. That inbuilt footfall creates that demand for your hospitality and retail sectors. But it's also an opportunity then to bring services back into town centres as well and make them easily accessible for people. That means investing in public transport. That means investing in buses. I've got a keen interest as well in trams and investing in trams as a mode of transport, particularly in the valleys. So I think with our economy strategy, it provides us, I think, with a solid foundation to be able then to find those policies that matter to people and use the principles of that strategy to come up with really, really appealing policies. Those are just some of the stuff that have come as a result of our strategy.
Yeah, I know more Welsh government out of town. I know more Welsh government out of town offices, as we've seen in Llandudno Junction and in Aberystwyth even, absolutely and Merthyr, crazy. Jonathan, anything you would sort of say, a quick soundbite type of things you would say to try and sell these kind of policies to people?
I suppose as a policy wonk, let's face it, part of this is about being honest, I think, and there are no quick fixes to a lot of the economic problems that Wales is facing, and these are structural problems that will require a lot of hard work and a Welsh government with a determination to actually meaningfully do that work and to deliver on it, that we, frankly, currently don't have. So I wish that there were, I agree with what Luke has outlined, by the way, that on high streets, for example, on town centres, that we can say to people these things will start making a difference and will start making a difference quickly to your built environment, to your experience in your town centres, to how you are able to access goods and services in town centres. But we also have to be honest with people, I think, and say it's going to be really bloody hard work to undo a lot of the mistakes I think that Labour have made, and to start doing what could and should have been happening with the powers that we currently have over the last 25 years.
Yeah.
It's
You have to ask what has Labour achieved in 25 years? And it's
well,
very little. It's small. It's small. Yeah, really, isn't it? I mean, the things and the supporters of devolution. I'm desperate for things to say, whatever parties in Parliament, to say, yeah, these are the benefits of devolution, but it's really pretty meager, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, I think I can say this, that it's reform have a luxury that we don't have, which is they don't have to say anything about the detail. They don't have to have a detailed policy offer. They don't have to say how they're going to achieve anything. They don't get asked the same kinds of questions we get asked about the detail of their policy. We have to be honest about the detail of our policy, and we have to be honest and say, this stuff is going to be, some of it is going to be a grind. There's no way calling of selling a national skills audit as something,
Yeah,
fundamentally
it's not yeah,
fundamentally exciting, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen.
No.
But it's all part of making Wales work, making it a better place, and using the powers we have to do that.
Yeah, I fundamentally believe, right? Is devolution perfect? Is it where it needs to be right now? No. But I fundamentally believe that we have powers right now that we could be using a lot better.
Yeah.
That not only then will improve people's lives, but it will begin us on that journey as well to independence.
Yeah.
We have to start somewhere, and I feel like in 2026 now we have a real opportunity to begin that journey, to prove to people actually that Wales can deliver these things. There is nothing different about this. We are able to succeed as any other country would be able to succeed. There's a real opportunity here in 2026.
So I mean, I'm aware that we've gone past 35 minutes I initially suggested, and then a 45. So I mean, hopefully some people are still listening. But I found the conversation very interesting and also important, I think. And this is what podcasts I think are for, having a longer conversation than you'd have on a 3 minute interview on Radio Wales or Radio Cymru or whatever. Just go quickly to independence, and I'd like to finish off with just know a bit more about you. So I mean, we've discussed about the powers where Wales is now, with the powers we could be using in 2026. I know you've also been looking broadly at independence. I mean, just to briefly answer the question, is Wales economically viable? I ask this all the time, but I mean, it's a yes, no answer. Jonathan Evershed, is Wales independently viable? Is it something which should be just crashing down, or is it something we could easily achieve?
Yeah, of course it's I mean, of course it is. I mean, there's so many different answers to this question, isn't there? There's a long one, there's a short one, there's a medium-sized one. So I guess I'll try and give the medium size. Well, I've given the short one, haven't I? Which is yes. We have research that shows, that this idea of the subvention, if you like, from England, or the kind of the economic benefit that Wales receives from being a member of the Union is nonsense, is overestimated by up to £10 billion. That an independent Wales on day one would have a deficit comparable to any other European nation. That from that basis, assuming a pathway for Wales, an independent Wales, to rejoin the European Union, which is, Plaid Cymru's stated policy objective, that it could be running a fiscal surplus in the medium term, within 15 years. This is all research that Professor John Doyle at Dublin City University has done. That's been commissioned by Plaid Cymru, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't come with challenges, and I do think we have to be honest about those challenges. Challenges around things like borders, particularly in a context where an independent Wales would be a member of the European Union, but but our UK, if you like, or England really is not. That we have to be honest about those challenges. None of them can't be overcome. Fundamentally, there's no reason that they can't be overcome. I was very proud to lead on Plaid Cymru's work, or the work, I should say, of the Plaid Cymru Senedd group in terms of feeding into the Independent Commission on the Constitutional Future of Wales, which demonstrated, of course, that independence, it's there in black and white in an official Welsh government sponsored document that it's perfectly viable. And we've also, I think, begun to, to demonstrate through that work that not only is it viable, it's preferable. Mark Drakeford, when that commission report came out, said, well, of course it's viable, but but does that mean it's desirable? And I think there are, that in a way, he's kind of got his celebration the wrong way around there, because I think there are a lot more people that think it's desirable than think it's viable. So his conceding that it's viable is kind of grist to our mill. But I just finished by saying this, which I think ultimately, and one of the kind of underpinning, because of course I fundamentally believe that Wales cannot achieve that we can't do everything we want to and with the Welsh economy for so long as we remain part of the union. It's the union, in fact, that is ultimately keeping us poor. I fundamentally believe that. But I'm also absolutely clear, as Luke has already sort of outlined, that we can and should be doing more with the powers we currently have to build a platform that gets us ultimately to independence. We have to demonstrate that we can use those powers and use them constructively and with purpose and effectively to build the case for independence. I think that is, I don't see a contradiction there between looking to use the powers that devolution has given us while at the same time building the case for and building towards independence.
Yeah, what would you say then, Luke? That
Well, I mean, the answer to the question is yes. And I suppose Jonathan had the beauty of going first, so he's stolen all the points.
yes, he's stolen all your answers.
I think the important point there that Jonathan has made, I think, is actually we should be doing more with what we have now. But we are limited still. Even if we use those powers to their full extent, we are still limited in what we are able to actually do. And for me, seeing is believing. We have to convince people outside of the independence movement that independence is viable, that it is a way forward, because there are people out there with concerns. And one way of doing that is by using the powers that we have right now in an effective way. But it's also as well then building on that, getting those more powers devolved, getting stuff like the Crown Estates devolved so that we can create a sovereign wealth fund, getting stuff like devolution of justice, getting those institutions established. It all comes down and boils down to me to seeing is believing, and it's going to be a long journey, but it's a journey we have to do and we have to get right as well.
Good, thanks. Well, I'll just finish off with just quickly. I want to say so people know who you are. So, Luke, you're a Pencoed boy, so by Bridgend, so people maybe not too familiar with that. So, as someone said, placed halfway between Cardiff and Swansea, which I thought was a very unkind way of doing
that might be me, to be honest.
Well, I mean, a few people from Bridgend saying, a bit more self-respect and love for your own town. But so, how did you get into sort of into Plaid and independence? I mean, was your family full of flag-waving Welsh nationalists, Luke Fletcher?
No. I mean, a lot of people I imagine will know where Pencoed is. It'd be remiss of me to say that Pencoed, I think, still holds the title for producing the most Welsh rugby internationals.
Yeah, is this
So if
surprisingly?
you come to our rugby club, you'll see Welsh jerseys lining the walls. You can't move for Welsh jerseys down here. And I used to play for Pencoed Rugby Club, but
Oh,
obviously that didn't go very well, and that's why I'm
no.
doing it. But yeah, look, my family, to be honest with you, a typical South Wales working class family. My dad was a trade union rep. My nan was a trade union rep as well. Some of my earliest political memories, if we want to call them that, was coming home from school and my dad having trade union meetings in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And representing people who were really struggling or were in a bit of conflict in work for whatever
Yeah.
reason. And that I think has actually led to the very principles that underpin my politics as well, and that of fairness and ensuring that people get a fair chance in life. I mean, my path to independence actually came through going to university. I mean, I was the first of my family, of my immediate family to go to university. My cousin beat me to it. He managed to get to university before me. But the first of my immediate family to go to university. And I think seeing and being exposed to all these different ideas and political ideas is ultimately what led me
So
to
which
Plaid
university
Cymru.
did you go to?
Sorry,
Which university did you go to?
I went to Cardiff University.
In Cardiff, right?
Yeah. So I've been exposed to those ideas, I think ultimately led me down to the path of Plaid Cymru and independence. And, I mean, when I look back at it, actually, I had a teacher in Ysgol Llanhari. So again,
Yeah.
me and my brother, the only two who can speak Welsh in the family. I had a teacher in Ysgol Llanhari who was really keen to talk about politics and talked about Plaid Cymru quite a bit.
Was
Um,
that a history teacher?
a history teacher, yeah.
Was his name Colin Parry?
No, it wasn't
Oh,
Colin.
right.
No, it wasn't Colin. No, I
I
didn't
know
have
Colin.
Colin Parry. Colin actually, yeah, he was my, he actually taught A-level law when I was,
Oh, right.
so he actually did teach me at one point.
Yeah.
And yeah, I got a lot of good memories of those classes. But then we went through to university, and then people like Richard Wyn Jones and Ed Poole ended up being my tutors. So I
All right.
suppose in some way it was written in the stars a bit.
But it's interesting, isn't it? So, I mean, you could easily have gone into the Labour Party, and then you'd be just coming up with some cliches now, saying, well, you can't do stuff, and Wales is basically destined to be having begging board politics and the sort of Oliver twist of
Well, I
politics.
mean, ultimately, I think it's important to say that because of that trade union background and the exposure to the trade union movement in my younger years, I was a member of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
It
Well, I
was
mean,
when I
it's
went to university then that I changed. I'd left the Labour Party and I didn't actually join a party for I think it was about 2 or 3 years maybe, and then I
so how far back
became.
was this? Just so people on podcasts who can't see your boyish good looks, Luke. What, about 10 years ago, something like that, is it?
It would have been a bit longer, I think.
Was it?
No, actually, no, it would be about 10 years ago. Yeah. So,
No wrinkles, Jonathan Evershed. You notice these things as you get older. So
well, there's a reason why I grow a beard because it hides any wrinkles. It also gives the impression that I have a jawline, which I really, really do not.
Right, okay.
But
Top
yeah.
tips. Yeah, some fashion top tips are here on Radio YesCymru as well. Jonathan Evershed, I mean, you're obviously a rabid Welsh nationalist family up there, or not?
Yeah, the name the name's a clear giveaway, isn't it? No, very much not. I grew up on a farm just north of Aberystwyth. Um, I went to Penglais, which
Nice.
anyone from the area will know where that places me.
So that's the English medium school in high school
Precisely.
in
So,
Aberystwyth.
um, you know, I learned Welsh as a second language. The only well, halfway fluent Welsh speaker in the family, anyway. All of which is to say that no, I don't come from a Welsh nationalist background. That's not to say that I don't come from a political background.
Yes.
Dad, in particular, as well as being a farmer, has done a lot of work in and on the NHS in Wales.
Yeah,
He's
much respected locally.
well,
No, he is.
no, I'm happy to hear that. I mean,
Yeah.
when you say that you're Jack Evershed's son, people respond in one of two ways, let's say.
Right, okay.
Locally.
But then, I mean,
Um,
how did you come into Plaid and independence then? Because I mean, it's
so I
often
mean, just like on
you should have
independent,
been a landowning Tory then, Jonathan, surely.
well, my grandfather will be very disappointed that I'm not.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Just like my answer on independence, there's a short, medium, and long version of this
Okay.
answer, really. But my journey, but in a nutshell, my journey to being proud to call myself, Welsh, actually, never mind a Welsh nationalist, and I am, and I'm unashamedly so. Um, Goes via my time in Northern Ireland, in the north of Ireland, where I did my PhD on the kind of community and cultural politics of Ulster loyalism, actually.
Great.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And you know, in a way, trying to condense 800 years of Irish history into a single sentence. There are Northern Ireland is one of those places in the world where the legacy of British imperialism and of the Union per se,
Mm.
where the damaging consequences of it are so in evidence, right? And that's the case, actually, in my view, for all of Northern Ireland's communities. When I after my PhD, I worked as an academic in University College Cork on a project exploring Brexit and its impact on Northern Ireland. And one of the things that was so stark there was how ready, the British establishment in general, the Tories in particular, were to sell unionists in Northern Ireland out to get the
Yeah,
version
amazing. Incredible.
Brexit that they wanted, and all the while unionism in Northern Ireland sort of continuing to kind of hold on to the coat trails of that same
Yeah.
establishment. And
It's like a cargo cult, isn't it?
precisely, and there's no clearer demonstration in my mind of the like long-term emotional, cultural, political, economic damage that the union has done to everywhere outside of the southeast of England, frankly.
Yeah, I think we'd agree on
And
that.
and that brought me, through that project also, brought me to this, this set of conclusions about what the union's done here in Wales. At the same time, the COVID pandemic kind of completely reshaped how I thought about
All right.
home and about
Yeah.
Wales as my home. And that's when I started really learning Welsh. So, I did it as a second language at school, but I,
Yeah.
didn't really start learning it properly until during the pandemic, actually. Partly it was something to do, but also feeling that wanting to reconnect with
Interesting.
home, and had this moment of reappraisal of what I wanted to do with my life and the skills that I have and how I would best use them to make the kind of political change I want to see in the world. And Plaid Cymru has been has been a real homecoming for me.
Oh, well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Good. Well, those are two very interesting backgrounds and very different as well. And I always find this interesting. And I know listeners and viewers of Radio YesCymru like to hear this as well, and think it mirrors the experience of a lot of other people who are listening to the program. Jonathan Evershed and Luke Fletcher, thanks a lot for making time to speak to me, Sean Jobbins, here on the Radio YesCymru podcast. We're on your favourite podcast apps, on the YesCymru YouTube channel, and also on TikTok, Insta, Facebook, and Twitter/X, in terms of social media. So spread the love and spread the message. Until the next issue of Radio YesCymru, take care, and we'll see you again. Diolch.